Hello, and welcome to the second part of the lecture for week 6 on chapter 8, the third act of mind reasoning. I'd like to devote this video to section 5 on page 194 on truth and validity. Also, I'd like to talk about the idea of certainty and laws of logic versus laws of nature as well, that also come up, although more indirectly. But I think these are very interesting problems here. So I find this particular page, these particular pages, 194 and 195, quite interesting for their content. So I know in this course we really do a lot of basic work on material and formal fallacies. It can be a bit dry, it can be a bit tedious, but I'm hoping that everyone sort of does a bit of work on the formal fallacies by themselves, just so they have a bit of a feel for these things. They might be a bit dry, they might be a bit tedious, but it will help you. Having a sense of the basics would help you understand the arguments at the high level when we start getting to more interesting aspects of the content of this course, such as here in section 5, truth and validity. So let's just summarize. Arguments are either logically valid or logically invalid. If they are logically invalid, they contain a logical fallacy. The word fallacy has a specific narrow meaning in logic. So often in common sense language, we talk about someone making a fallacy, or in terms of just making a mistake in general, or saying the wrong thing, getting the facts wrong. We're not concerned here about getting the facts wrong or anything to do with an empirical mistake. Confusing the skim milk for the regular milk. That's not what we mean by fallacy. Fallacy has a specific narrow logical meaning in logic. It's a technique, one of these technical terms again. So not every mistake is a fallacy. An error of fact, like the belief that the earth is flat, is not called a fallacy in logic, though sometimes it is called so in ordinary language. Only an argument can be fallacious, not a proposition. A fallacy is a mistake in reasoning. A fallacy makes an argument logically invalid. An argument without any fallacies is logically valid. Its conclusion follows necessarily from its premises. Okay, so just to reiterate the threefold structure of logic again. One, terms. Remember back to the distinction between terms, propositions, and arguments. So we have this architecture starting from smaller elements, moving on to large elements. We start off with terms and words, move on into propositions, sentences, statements, and then onto the larger overarching arguments. So we're building the architecture up from the building blocks of words through to larger sentences, statements, which we refer to as propositions, and in order to create arguments. So that's the architecture here. So terms are never true or false, and never logically valid or invalid, but only clear or unclear, ambiguous. So words, when you talk about words, we don't invoke validity. You're using this word wrong in an invalid sense. We don't even say true or false when we're referring to a specific word, because in the act of providing a word, you're providing a name, you're giving a name. So what we're concerned with at that level, at the level of words, is clarity, ambiguity. If that word is suitably clear to provide the particular function that we're using the word for. So yeah. we're not, so at the level of words, not interested in validity or even or truth at that level. At the second level, propositions are never valid or invalid, but only true or false, and each term within a proposition is either clear or unclear. So we see that. So at the level of propositions, the whole sentence, and each particular sentence, we are concerned at this level. We're concerned with true. Is it a true description? And are the words within that sentence clear or unclear? So at the third level, the level of argument, where the propositions come together, the premises and the conclusion come together to form the overall argument in this whole sort of architecture. Arguments are neither valid or invalid. Each proposition in an arguments are either valid or invalid. Each proposition in an argument is either true or false, and each term is either clear or unclear. So let me repeat that again. Arguments are either valid or invalid. Each proposition in an argument is either true or false, and each term is either clear and unclear. I think understanding this would help you to analyze particular arguments that you can then break it down. So I mean, the argument might be valid, but are there particular words that are not necessarily as clear as what they could be? So this is where logic can help you gain a real critical capacity, ability to really be highly critical, and people in certain areas. I remember going to my first conference, a conference on Popper, in the Czech Republic, and one thing I remembered here was a certain professor from ANU, and he was just absolutely devastating in the criticisms he provided. I don't think he said anything positively useful, but he could just demolish almost anyone's argument. And I thought there's a particular skill of a lot of analytic philosophers, particularly Popperians as well. They're very good at the critical part, the critical problem solving. So I think this is where the practical aspect of critical problem solving comes out, an ability to really know how do we judge the particular segments and segments and objects and content within an argument. That we're not just using the same yardstick for whole thing. We can delve in, and we have different tools. I think that's a good, useful way of looking at it. We have different tools to analyze an argument at its different levels. We have the validity or invalidity of the term at the argumentative level. At the level of propositions, we have truth or falsity, and at the level of words, we have a clear or unclear. So a good argument is one whose terms are all clear, whose propositions are all true, whose logic is valid. A bad argument is one with an unclear term or false proposition or logical fallacy. Okay, so truth is a relationship between a single proposition of the real world or the nature of things or objective reality, or what is outside of, independent of the proposition and the mind that expresses it. So this definition of truth, this is really the correspondence theory of truth made famous by the Polish logician Alfred Tarski, that I've looked at a bit in class. They introduced you to his life and work a little bit. The problem here of getting the particular statement, the particular proposition, and relating it to reality, the world out there, the world of facts and common sense, such that truth can be used in a way that conforms to our common sense expectations of truth, our common sense language usage of that of truth. So validity is a relationship between propositions. So you notice that validity is a logical tool. It's a tool within the category of logic, not unlike truth, which seeks to connect logic with empirical reality out there. Validity aims to just connect propositions and connect arguments together in a way that is not directly related to the empirical world out there, the world of common sense experience. Okay. So let's go down. A valid argument gives us now an important point on certainty in page 195. I'd like to draw out. A valid argument gives us certainty about its conclusion. It is not absolute certainty, but relative certainty. That is, certainty relative to the premises. It is conditional certainty or hypothetical certainty. This is a very interesting point. The idea, Popper was very famous for the idea that we need to give up on the idea of absolute certainty. That we can hold something as being certain, but certain within certain confines. So relative to the particular context. So within the particular logical structure of the argument, we can speak of certainty. We can speak of certainty within its deductive context, within a syllogistic context, but there's nothing absolute about this idea of certainty. So Popper goes even further actually and says, well, we need to give up on the idea of certainty altogether. So, and I think kind of when you're speaking about hypothetical certainty or conditional certainty, are you really speaking of certainty at all at this point? So interesting to know. Perhaps you can argue in mathematics, yes. In logic, where we're operating with words that have a degree of ambiguity that is not possible to eliminate. I think there'll always be a degree of uncertainty that we have to contend with here. So yeah, following Popper, let's give up an idea of certainty. Okay. Yeah. So I think we can. I was going to say one thing about the laws of logic and laws of nature. I mean, I'll just say something quickly. For those of you who are also taking the Enlightenment philosophy course, we do look at Aristotle and his four causes. We see the way in which, in Aristotle's thought, the laws of nature and the laws of logic are entwined in his causal explanations within the four causes, and that is a kind of problem. And what modern logic seeks to do is it seeks to treat causality at the level of logical deduction separately from causality in the physical world. So when we can see that in the use of validity. When we see the word validity, that is referring to causality at the logical level, not at the physical level of the natural world. Whereas truth ultimately is something that seeks to engage more with the natural world. So I think that's and because of this, even truth itself is a problematic. It is a term in logic that has been it doesn't have a simple role. There is a lot of disputation over the term truth because of its perceived function of relating propositions to an external world. So you've got your proposition, and to what extent is that proposition actually reflective of what's outside in objective external reality? And that's the problem. Tarski believed he solved that problem. Popper followed Tarski in saying that yes, he managed to solve that. Not necessarily convinced of that, but it's interesting anyhow. Validity, it's really is more of a simple, straightforward matter. It's related to the relationship between propositions at the logical domain rather than the empirical world out there. So that's all for this video. I hope you found some interesting things in it that you might like to discuss in our online lecture Thursday morning. Thank you. Bye.